that is okay. Bright red color. Quite pigmented. There is a true chaos. Pumpkins, pumpkins everywhere. Hello, welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is Heather. It's a beautiful foggy morning here today, and it's been very, very cool the past week or so. It's supposed to be cool for the rest of July into August, so it almost feels like fall, especially when you have a pumpkin patch. Last week on camera, I moved this stake with you guys so we could see exactly how far the pumpkins grow in a week. So we've gotten, I think it was 2 bouts of a really good rain, about 2 inches of rain, maybe 2.5 this week. And so last week, I think we gained 3 feet. We've gained much more this week, 5, maybe 6 feet. Awesome, the amount of growth that we got. So we'll move it again. There we go. We just had friends visiting us this last week, and my friend Kristen and I came through here and looked at all the pumpkins that we could find, and there are so many pumpkins in here. They're just hard to see because a lot of them are green right now. Most of the ones that we're able to see are on the front side of the patch. This is the back side that I had been trying to keep clear. I'm definitely not winning in that department. The goats are not eating this right now, so maybe it'll be all right. Let's see, there's a big pumpkin down in here. There's so many like that. Now you will notice that we are starting to see a few of the plants getting a little bit yellow down the line. I came through and I sort of looked because I was wondering if maybe we had finally started to see some of the very common pest pressure that we get. You know, I don't, oh, here we go. There he is. That's a baby squash bug. So the squash bugs are here. I expected to see them, and because of the size of this patch, I'm just gonna leave it alone. I know that they will sap the nutrients and things out of the leaves. I know that ultimately they'll mean the end of these plants, but I kind of want to see what happens. The plants are quite large and they have really started to spread out into the field. So it's my thinking that these vines have likely rooted down in several spots. They're not just rooted at the one spot where I planted them. And so if part of the plant dies, the rest of the plant should live pretty well. And I think we're still gonna get quite a few pumpkins. I only have a couple sunflowers out here, and they're just about 5 feet tall at this point. These are mammoth sunflowers. There's a pumpkin here. There's one behind it, see in there? Look at this one. Pumpkins, pumpkins everywhere. I have started to steer the pumpkin around this volunteer squash that just came up in the patch here. This pumpkin patch is situated where we had a pig pen last year, and the pigs were fed all manner of garden refuse and kitchen refuse, and this squash popped up as a result of that. It has started to fruit, and I still don't know what it is. I showed you guys this fruit last week. The fruit is white and it's big. It's kind of looks a little bit like a zucchini, but I've never grown a white zucchini. Do you guys have any idea what this might be? One thing I do know is it seems to be decently pest resistant, which is awesome. And so I've just been leaving it. It's a really interesting little mystery there. Good morning, sir. If you are not one that watches our regular vlogs, you may not have gotten the update on the birdhouse gourd that's growing here in the greenhouse. This was a volunteer. I have not noticed any gourds pop up on this. It has put up quite a few flowers. These will open at night actually, because the birdhouse gourd attracts a moth in order to get pollinated. I've seen quite a few white flowers, but no gourds yet. We've got this half row of peppers growing along a string, and many of them are mature enough now where their fruits are starting to flush and get their mature color. These here are the Marconi peppers. It looks like maybe they have another day or so before they're fully this bright red color. This one is called the Yellow Monster. It is starting to turn the yellowy color. It's not exactly a monster-sized pepper, but I have suspicions that this particular pepper didn't really get tapped into a good amount of nutrition. It only put on these 2 peppers so far, but we do have some more blooms. Our pimento peppers have started to flush. I thought about harvesting some peppers today, but I think I'm gonna leave them. Peppers are just kind of one of those things where if I don't feel like I have an immediate use for it, there's really no sense in picking it. They last a long time just sitting here on the plant. It's like a living pantry. Most of the time we just come through the archway to look at some of these plants, but I really enjoy viewing the plants from this side. We've got some eggplants over here. We've been watching this one. It is growing slowly, but these ones down here have really started to put on their fruits. This one I just have labeled as a round eggplant. It's beautiful. And then this one over here is a black beauty eggplant. The plant itself is quite tall. It has a lot of flowers that have gotten pollinated. So far, no eggplants to see on there right now, but next week we should have some. On the other side of the archway, this here is the biggest eggplant that I have. This is actually the biggest eggplant that I feel like I've ever grown. There's a really big eggplant down here that I probably need to take care of. We've got more flowers. They're absolutely gorgeous. Look at that. And then I noticed we've got another eggplant. So I think these guys, even though they got a little bit of a slow start, we're gonna have good success with these. That side of the archway really just mirrors this one. So we have this long Asian eggplant here, this round eggplant, and then this here is a black beauty. Check out all the blooms on this one. At the end of this bed and the one right across the way, I do have this lettuce leaf basil. It's time to harvest this. I need to be making more pesto. I have already harvested this one time, and you can be pretty brutal with it. Basil bounces back very, very well, and the more you prune it, the more bushy it's gonna get, and it's gonna help it from bolting. It's gonna keep it from putting on its flowers and essentially ending its life. Some of this basil is pretty well hidden in here. It's been doing okay despite being shaded. Look what I just noticed over here. More inky cap mushrooms. I have a book on mushrooms that says that these are edible, but there's like nothing to them, so you really don't want to. They don't last very long. Within a few hours, those will be essentially wilted down. They'll be kind of slimy and inky, which is where they get their name. The inky cap is growing at the base of these strawberry tomatoes, and I have picked one ripe one. Ooh, this is something to note. So do you guys see these little black like granules on this leaf? There is a caterpillar nearby. That is caterpillar poop. It actually comes out of the caterpillar green and it turns that brown color. Let's see if we can find it. It does look like it's been over at the eggplant too. The only caterpillars that we have physically seen, they're brown and they have some stripes. I think they are armyworms technically, but I am waiting for the tomato hornworm. Those are a lot harder to see on the plants because they are green. What you're going to be looking for is any areas where the leaves seem to have been stripped. They will go after all nightshades. I haven't really seen them much on eggplant, but I have seen them on peppers as well as tomatoes. I don't see much damage going on right here, so we might have to just wait, unfortunately, and let the damage lead us to wherever the worm is. Anyway, what I was trying to show you was that the strawberry tomatoes are starting to ripen. They are gorgeous. I think this is easily one of my favorite looking tomatoes. Not all tomatoes that are pretty taste really good. This one is okay though. I like it. I continue to grow it both for the flavor and for its appearance. The cherry tomatoes are officially taller than me at this point. Lots and lots of blooms, so lots and lots of fruits to be had very soon. Much of my garden is about a month behind. I started a month late on a lot of things, partially because we are converting this greenhouse from growing in ground to growing in these raised beds, and I was blessed with quite a few raised beds in the beginning of the season and I wanted to put them in. Even though we are a little bit behind, things are starting to really come to fruition. This here is the Dr. Witchy's tomato. It is ready. It's got this little brown spot where it was sitting on the cattle panel. But check that out, it's gorgeous. This is my first year growing this variety. I've heard a lot about it. It is very delicious. This isn't the first one that I've harvested. Another tomato that we've harvested quite a few of in the last little while are these tomatoes that are labeled black crim. I don't know that is what this is, but we've gotten quite a few of these tomatoes, and they are delicious, albeit a little bit small. Their size just might be a factor of the fact that a lot of this soil in the beds here is brand new. I amended a lot of the soil with some of our compost from our barns, but not all of it. Truthfully, I can't remember which beds have some of our compost and manure in it and which ones don't, but I think I'm kind of figuring it out just by looking at how the plants are. I was hoping to get this one off all in one piece. I think it's one, technically, maybe technically 2 tomatoes, but it has 1 stem, and this was probably 2 flowers on the 1 stem. Isn't that funny? We are dealing with quite a bit of disease in the greenhouse. Recently I had to spray milk in the greenhouse to try to combat more aphids and more whiteflies. They just got to a point where it was just way too much. And whenever you get the leaves of tomato plants wet, you do risk spreading disease. I do have less of an issue with this with tomatoes that are just growing out in the open air and getting a lot of rain on them. I have fans in the greenhouse here, but these guys are also pretty intensively planted. They're planted close together. I didn't do a lot of pruning this year, and so I'm kind of paying for it with this, but that is okay. See how sad and depressed this leaf looks? It doesn't really look like blight to me. I think some of these are dead whiteflies, some of the white bits, but then there's like a black, dusty looking. This just doesn't look good. It almost reminds me of a mildew, which I don't know that I've ever seen on my tomatoes. Actually, every single day, the tomatoes look worse and worse. So these might have to come out sooner rather than later, which is kind of sad, but don't worry, I've got ideas of what to put in here. This tomato right here is called the Berkeley's Tie-Dye. Many of these tomatoes that I'm growing this year are new to me this year. I wanted to try some varieties that I had never gotten the chance to try before. The Berkeley Tie-Dye is one of those tomatoes that turns ripe even when it's still green. It's got a little bit of color to it, but the main color is this green color. And so in order to tell if they're ripe, you kind of have to give them a squeeze. And if it's softer like a ripe tomato, it's probably ripe. And like I said, there are these little orange tops, and so that's a pretty good tell too. Oh, okay. So here is another tomato that I really wasn't sure what was going on with it. This one is moldy, so I waited too long. This one is called the Green Cherokee and also is a tomato that ripens green. And I didn't realize that. This one had started to turn a little bit off, and I wondered what was going on. See, there's like a black mold in the greenhouse. I don't know, I've never experienced that one before. I'm sure many of you follow lots of homesteading channels, and I've seen quite a few channels complaining that nobody shows the hard side of homesteading. Yes, they do, if you look for them. We try really hard to show you just exactly what's happening on our homestead, to include the bad stuff. I mean, it doesn't, I would love to be able to just show you around my farm and my greenhouse and just show you all of the beautiful things, but bad things happen to all of us. This has been a pretty hard year for me for tomatoes, and we're getting some, and I have some tomatoes still frozen from even 2 years ago, so we'll have plenty for what we need. These guys are throwing me curveballs this year, and I'm getting to the point where fighting all of these battles isn't worth it. But there are some fruits in here that I would like them to ripen. I'm not necessarily holding out hope that the flowers that are out here will be getting any fruit from. The Ponderosa Pink tomato has been ripening its fruit. This is my favorite one so far out of the new varieties that I've grown this year. But right next to it, this plant, this is our Berries Crazy Cherry. It looks pretty sick. Tucked away in the corner of my greenhouse, I do have this Roma tomato in this planter that really isn't doing too badly. It was looking kind of yellow probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I put some liquid fertilizer from Fox Farms down in the water reservoir, and it has greened up quite a bit. I'm actually seeing some new flowers on here, which is something that I mentioned in our last vlog, but I wanted to mention it here since so many people watch our garden tours, so many more people. Romas are what's known as a determinant tomato, and they say that those tomatoes will only grow to a determined height, which I do find to be true. But they also say that they put on all their fruit at once, and they put on large flushes of fruit all at once, but I get multiple flushes of fruit off of my determinants that I've grown. I don't know if that's something that's common, but what I've grown is Roma tomatoes and another determinant called Heat Master. And the Heat Master tomato puts on tomatoes, it cranks them out all season long. And we don't exactly have a short season here. So if you are thinking about growing determinants, plan to get more fruit than you expect, especially if you plan to give the fruit that space the entire season. As far as the aphids go in the greenhouse, I do feel like we've gotten a handle on them. I came through and I sprayed with a diluted milk mixture. It's half milk and half water. And prior to that, because of seeing some caterpillar poop, I had sprayed some spinosad over the plants. It's an organic pest control for worms and things. And I really think the moisture on the leaves just really helped spread disease. It's not good. As far as an update on the aphids, this particular bed of cucumber had them real bad. These are called miniature white cucumbers. We are starting to see some flowers and some little baby fruit, so we are going to get a harvest out of these soon. I had noticed that some of the leaves on the plant were starting to look a little bit shrivelly, and this can be a sign that you're dealing with something. You can see probably down in there that we've got plenty of aphids and whiteflies. Some of these are living, some of them are dead. After I had come through and sprayed the milk mixture, many of the aphids and things died, and I came through and just sprayed them off. I sprayed all the dead aphids off with water, and the plants are doing okay, but we still have some. Aphids reproduce asexually, and so if you've got one, you're going to have more pretty soon. It's just a matter of keeping them down, keeping their numbers down. I've had a couple people ask me, Heather, why don't you release a beneficial insect like a ladybug in your greenhouse? And the reason that I haven't was because I do see them in here. And I assumed, man, there's so much food in here that the ladybugs are going to reproduce like crazy, but maybe they haven't. I did see one on an eggplant when we were looking at those, and I don't know if I got it on camera or not, but it seems like the population of aphids far exceeds the population of ladybugs. So I should probably put them in here, because even when it comes time to take these plants out, the aphids will still be in here, and they'll probably attack the things that I'm going to put in my fall and winter garden, and I don't want that. Hey guys, I'm going to interject on myself for just a second. I'm currently editing the video that you're watching and decided, let me just order my ladybugs. And I went on to Arbico Organics, which is the website that I like to use for the things that I can't access locally for the garden. And they had an update in 2022 that states, we're aware that ladybugs are an iconic beneficial insect. You've counted on them to help control soft-bodied pests in your garden, farm, or greenhouse. Unfortunately, their popularity has contributed to their decline. Continued drought, wildfires, and habitat destruction in the Sierra Nevada foothills where ladybugs are collected, paired with excessive harvesting, has created conditions which Arbico Organics does not feel that the commercial sale of ladybugs is sustainable. We hope future generations of ladybugs are replenished and responsible harvesting methods are employed. They do have a solution though. They said while ladybugs are favored due to their visibility and ferocious appetite, they're often not the best predatory insect for your infestation and environment. Below are currently available predatory insects that are reared for garden and agricultural use. So because of this, I have ordered green lacewings. I ordered adults and I ordered some larvae. Green lacewings, that's what I ordered, not ladybugs. One of the things that I'm growing this year that is bringing me an extreme amount of joy is this Malabar spinach. I do have a few little flowers popping up on this side now, and we have some little berries on this side. This whole plant is very interesting to me. So here are the little flower buds. I've never actually seen them open at all. They kind of always look like a bud to me, and then they turn into these little black, really dark purple, really berries. See that? So here are the berries. You can eat these. I really wasn't sure when we first started growing these, but I looked it up and they are edible. There's a big giant seed in the middle. At least one. like that. That's a big Malabar spinach seed. And the flavor, I read online that it was underwhelming, and it truly is. It doesn't taste like anything I would call a berry. I'm sure that it is technically still a berry, but it tastes exactly like the leaves taste, which is like lettuce. Many people will use these as a natural dye. Let me see if I can squish it, because it is quite pigmented. So that's a fun little use for these. That's probably the only practical use for them. I mean, you can eat them. You can obviously collect the seeds from them. But I need to figure out what I can dye. I do have some wool inside, some white wool. This is our planting space that we lovingly call the lane. And at the cap of the lane, I have 2 different grow bags here with the same melon growing inside. This melon is dealing with some kind of disease. It kind of looks like blight to me, though I'm not exactly sure. I will say that I'm very excited to see this. This is an armpit melon that is starting to grow, so it's well pollinated. There are actually quite a few on here. See, there's one right there, a little one. This armpit melon is a project of mine. I am just trying to get these seeds to be stable. We had a cross between a Kajari melon and a Charente melon pop up in our garden. I think it was in 2022. And I loved it. It's really, really good. And I have just been planting the seeds from those melons ever since. And I think they say it takes 7 or 8 generations to really have a stable variety developed, and so we're working on it. These are F3 melons. So we planted F2 seeds, F3 melons, and so next year when we plant the F3 seeds, we'll get F4 melons. So we're well on our way. I don't think that these melons are gonna last until the first frost, given that there is disease on them. I have been taking off the diseased leaves as I do. You can probably see the wetness on these leaves and really the wetness in this grass. We have not gotten rain overnight, and I don't think it rained at all yesterday. This is just the dew. The dew here is extremely heavy, and it's basically just as bad as rain being on the leaves. The heavy dew just allows those spores and things from the disease on the leaves to spread. But we'll at least get a few melons and get to enjoy their flavor, as well as save their seed, and the seed is really the goal. Behind them we have a volunteer cucumber, and in this spot last year I grew some gherkins, although I don't know what this exactly is. Let's see. That does not really look like a gherkin to me, to be honest. Usually with gherkins, when you pick them, they can be this size and they have all these little bumps on them. It just looks like a classic pickling cucumber. And this is a little bit sandy, like sandpapery feeling. And so it's got small bumps, but nothing big. I'm pretty sure that the gherkin cucumber that I grew here last year is a hybrid, or was a hybrid gherkin, and same thing goes for hybrid varieties of plants. When you save seed back from the hybrid, you're not guaranteed to get something that is like the parent plant, because those genes are not stable. And so this is what we got this year. It's not a gherkin. I did grow a variety called Bait Alpha or Beet Alpha a little bit further up the trellis. I don't think I had left any of those to go to seed last year, but maybe. This doesn't really seem like that either, though it looks a little bit closer to that. This little guy is starting to develop just the tiniest little seeds inside, kind of like a gherkin would. They mature at a smaller size than something like a Bait Alpha would. So I don't know, mystery cucumber. It's good, it's a cucumber. And then right behind that cucumber, we have our chicken and dumplings cowpeas, which I have started to train up onto the trellis. You can see my tape there. These will, or at least should, grow up the trellis on their own. I just wanted to guide them. They had extended some pretty long arms out this way, and I didn't want them to try to grow along the ground necessarily. I wanted them up on the trellis, so they're well on their way. So far, I have not noticed any flowers, but I feel like they are going to appear very soon. And then back behind these, we have a volunteer birdhouse gourd, which I didn't want my husband to mow over, so I put this here, and it is almost to the trellis. I think, yep, it's grabbed onto the trellis down here. Isn't that funny? So we're going to allow this to grow. This volunteer birdhouse gourd being out here in the open is likely to attract more pollinators than the one that blooms inside the greenhouse. I have a low sidewall greenhouse. You can see it's only 3 feet high on the sidewalls, and I think that sometimes it's hard for pollinators to really find their way. Oh, baby cows. Hold on. Hold on. Oh, they all ran inside. So our neighbor keeps cattle, and he has a creep feeder in there for the babies. Oh, those guys are so cute. Good morning, ladies. Hi, baby cow. Hey, big mama. I just love it. It's like we have cows, but we don't. So down here on the cow side of the lane, I had planted some melons inside this brand new bed that we have here. You can look at them and tell that they're not doing spectacularly. Now, I do have them planted close, and that was for a reason. I wanted to make sure that the birds that we have here wouldn't just completely take out any one plant that I had planted in each planting hole. But they look yellow. They don't look healthy, and they are quite stunted. So when you see, this one looks a little bit better, but when you see something like this, where it's just not really growing, it's turning yellow, usually that is a sign that you're dealing with just some nutrient issues. The plant, for whatever reason, either doesn't have access to nutrients or can't take up those nutrients. And so I'd like to kind of dig up some of these to see if we can tell what's going on. All right, so this, for being a tiny seedling, has pretty good root structure. That looks good. So I'm not worried that the soil that I put in here is still hot. Nitrogen burn on a plant, you're gonna see it on the roots, or you're gonna notice it because of a lack of roots. You'll have a very small, very wilty type root system, and a lot of times with nitrogen burn, you'll be able to tell on the stem as well. So that's not what we're dealing with. What this looks like to me is a nutrient deficiency, which it does not surprise me. We have purchased in bag soil to help us fill these beds. This particular bed does have manure and things inside of it, but those roots are so small they don't have access to those nutrients. They just don't have enough energy to grow that deeply. So what I'm going to want to do is thin these out just so the plant that I leave does have the most access to nutrients. And I am going to want to scratch in some granular fertilizer in here so that the plant gets the energy to grow, and then eventually it'll grow big enough to where it's able to put down the roots down into the compost that I have down in there. So maybe what I should do, because I'm getting ready to fill some more beds with some more purchased soil, is instead of layering like I do, I usually will lay down hay and then I'll lay down manure and then I'll put bagged soil on top of that. I may mix in our manure, and that'll probably give our plants a little bit more help with that bagged soil.
Cracks in them, and I didn't want bugs.
I know mine are cracking too. That's because it's been raining a lot. That looks so good. These are Hungarian heart tomatoes that Addie's growing in her garden. Good job. Yeah, they are plenty soft enough, and they did crack. It's just, we got 2.5 inches of rain this week.
They have big cracks.
Good job. The loofah has been doing incredibly. This is definitely one thing that for the past 2 years I have not regretted planting. My honeybees love it. I'm really not sure. It kind of looked like they were in there getting nectar and not necessarily pollen, but I've noticed that my honeybees just love all manner of cucurbit plants, whether it be cucumbers, melons, or things like this loofah. Look how huge that is. I think I first noticed this growing maybe 3 weeks ago, maybe a month, but it's real big. That's 2 feet long. I noticed that we have this one here now. There's this guy that dropped down as of last week. And then there's at least 2. Can you see them up there? And I'm sure that there's many more hiding in amongst here. I did see that the loofah was kind of starting to reach over. Can you see it way up in the, it's definitely connected to the sunflower up there. The sunflower will be able to support that for a time, but when the sunflowers kind of die back, that loofah will really kind of bend them over, but it'll be okay. I've stuck you guys up on the long tripod today so that I could put you up there so you can see the colors that are coming in on some of the sunflowers. They're significantly more yellow than I remembered them being when I saved the seed 3 or 4 years ago. They're actually a lot taller too than I remembered them being from the seed that I saved 3 or 4 years ago. But there's a little tinge of like a reddish orange in the middle of some of them, and no matter what color they are, sunflowers make me happy. I grow them every year. You'll notice some random tomato plants that are kind of stuck here and there in the raised bed garden. I put these here because these were some plants that I started in seed pots that I really did not have the space for in the greenhouse. There's this one over here too. I don't remember the varieties that I ran out of space for. This one kind of looks like a cherry type tomato. We also have quite a few volunteer cherry tomatoes, so even though the greenhouse really is dying back as far as tomatoes go, we're going to have so many tomatoes. There's quite a few volunteer tomatoes in here among where the blackberries have been. They have since really dried up. I don't think we're getting very many at all. This one's kind of gone by. So blackberry season may be over, at least for this year. We've actually noticed quite a few hummingbirds in with this zinnia partaking of the nectar, and that is definitely one of the things that I was hoping would happen. We like to feed the hummingbirds. The kids really like seeing, and we've got a lot of hummingbirds around here. But those hummingbird feeders, you can fill them with either that nectar that you can purchase, or you can make a nectar out of sugar and water. Because we keep honeybees, I want to keep my honeybees away from stuff like that, because the honeybees really don't care. As long as something has a high sugar content, they're gonna go for it. They will dehydrate that down into honey. They'll go after even like a spilled soda or something. So that we can keep our honey as pure as possible, I wanted to stop feeding out of those feeders. They say that honeybees can't access them. My honeybees did like hanging around those. So planting the flowers has given something better, honestly, for the hummingbirds as well as the bees. The flowers really have been kind of falling over this direction, right into the squash that I planted, but they really don't seem affected. They seem like they're growing really well. These are scallop squash, and you can see that I put these posts in here. I actually did this in a recent garden vlog, and the hope is to grow these squash vertically. I'm gonna have to tie them. They're not quite big enough yet, but in theory, we can tie the main stem of this squash plant to this T-post, trim off lower leaves as we need to. It'll increase airflow, and in theory, that should also help them take up a little bit less space. I've never tried growing them this way before. Normally, I just let them sprawl out and go wild. Sprawling out and going wild is what this melon will do. This is looking a lot better than it did last week. It really appreciated all the rain that we got. The okra also appreciated all the rain that we got. I think these guys have at least doubled in size, maybe tripled. This one here is the volunteer that took up residence here all on its own. That's an Alabama red okra. And these ones are Okinawa pink okra. No blooms yet, but they're thinking about it. See them in the armpit there? Oh, this green stalk. I think every week for probably the last 6 weeks I've said, this green stalk is looking pretty bad. It's time to deal with it. But I just don't have the heart. I think I will deal with some of this today. I do have some seeds in my pocket. But these little plants just keep putting on more blooms. They just keep trucking along, even though they don't look too great. This one looks pretty good. And look at all the little blooms. You can see we've got some really dead parts that look like they've died back quite well, but there's new growth on these, like new foliage and everything. I don't know. Looks like plants like this we can probably sacrifice. So it was really more brutal with that than I thought I was originally going to be. And you might think that I'm gonna take this over to the compost heap, and I'm not. And the reason that I really don't wanna put these particular plants in the compost is basically all year, because we've had such a wet year, they've been dealing with blight. And blight, I can't offhand remember if it's bacterial or fungal, but I do remember that it lives in the soil, and the last thing I want to do is inoculate my compost with that bacterium or fungus, whatever it is. And so these I'm actually going to take over to our burn barrel. For a few weeks, I had really debated about what I was going to put in the place of these tomatoes out here. Our growing season is quite long, but I can't like put a new tomato seed in here and expect to get fruit out of it at this point. And so I thought about maybe putting something in here that would be frost tolerant, like maybe some chard or something. And I could have done that. I've got some chard in the greenhouse right now though. I do have a lot of beans already growing, but just in case something happens to our beans that are back here, they are looking a little bit sickly again. I figured, why not another succession of beans? Beans are very quick turnaround. Usually you can go from seed to harvest in about 60 days. And truthfully too, it's smart to follow up a heavy feeding plant like a tomato with something like a bean. Beans don't take a lot out of the soil. They can actually serve to feed the soil with the nitrogen that they can pull out of the air. So I'm just going to put a couple seeds in each of these empty holes. I've just set the seeds on top of the soil in the cups, and what I'm going to do is actually just bury them with a little bit of soil. This is the Coast of Maine container mix, the potting soil, and there is a little bit of nutrition in this soil, which is a good thing. And it also is really great on the moisture retention, which is a good thing. We are getting quite a bit of rain this week, so I'm probably not going to water these in. I'm just going to allow the rain to do that work for me. This green stalk, a lot like the raised beds that we have put in our greenhouse and other spots around our property this year, is a brand new planting space. So the soil needs work. So that was one of the reasons that I decided to plant beans here, because even if we happen to not really need the harvest that comes out of these pots, the beans themselves will be able to pull nitrogen out of the air and feed the life in the soil here. So even if we happen to not make a harvest, we're at least doing well by this container by putting something in it. Especially something that's not particularly demanding to either take care of or to grow, or not demanding on the soil. Over here, we start to enter the true chaos part of the raised bed garden. There's so much going on in here. We've got zinnia. There are these Kelway golden chamomile, which I really have enjoyed looking at, but I haven't done a lot of, deadheading or anything, so they're kind of wild. There's volunteer tomatoes, of course. We've got this one, which I believe is a yellow currant tomato, as loves to grow here. But then we've got things like this, which is one of the reasons I haven't weed whacked in here. This tomato, did it start? Let me see. Right there, you can see it growing out of the bed. But it's going to root along the ground here, so I don't know. I may just leave it. It's healthy looking. It's got this purpling in the stem, so I think it's a different variety than we're used to seeing. It does look like it may be a cherry variety. At first I thought maybe it was a black beauty, but I don't think so anymore. My dill was really laying over on this bed here and really kind of shading out my walking onions, which have seen better days. So I kind of just crudely shoved them over that way. I really just need to cut all that out. They have laid down tons of seed, which was the whole point of this particular patch this year. I just want to create a kind of perennial situation out of this dill. Dill is not a perennial plant, but it seeds so readily that it comes back every year. So I think we've accomplished our goals with that, so I need to pull that out. Oh, I might actually see a lot volunteering back, which was good. That's the goal. I think if we come around the back here where there's many more tomatoes, that we should be able to see those volunteers. See down here? That's what we wanted. So this will be new fresh dill going into the fall, so I can take this stuff out, this wild stuff. Mission accomplished. I have been peeking in here amongst the asparagus ferns to see if I can see any wine cap mushrooms coming up. I think it was December, maybe January of this past winter, where I laid out some mushroom mycelium in here of wine caps, and we have been getting a lot of rain this year. I haven't exactly kept up like watering by hand, but there's been so much rain that we have gotten quite a few mushrooms popping up. I just haven't noticed any wine caps yet, because we do have so many other species of mushrooms growing just wild in these beds. There's a chance that the mycelium kind of went through a battle and the wine cap lost the battle, but I'm not really sure. I'm gonna keep looking. Haven't seen any. Speaking of volunteers, I told you guys that I would update you guys on the volunteer tromboncino squash that's over here. It's still here. The morning glory is really starting to take over this space, as it does every year. There are some tomatoes out here too, but there is this tromboncino squash. You can see the leaves, and I happen to know that there are some squash trying to ripen out here, like this guy. Did I just snap that off? So in moving this, I snapped this off. I did not really mean to, but that is okay. These guys are edible at all of their stages. This one really wasn't quite ready to pick as far as long-term storage. You can see that it's a little green still, and really, if I put my thumbnail on the skin, you can see that I'm leaving a mark. That's how you know it's not quite ready. Really, you want to be able to press your thumbnail into it and not really leave much mark at all if your goal is to keep these guys long term. But looks like we're gonna have to eat this week. Next to this lovely heap, we have our elderberry plant, and I have made a couple harvests off of this. I got a whole 7-gallon bucket just a couple of weeks ago. All I did was pick off the ripe heads and put them in the freezer, inside freezer bags. And the reason I did that is that the stems of the elderberry are toxic. So when I go to make my syrup or my jam, I really don't want to have many of the stems in there at all. A few isn't going to harm you, but you really want to try to get most of it out. And the easiest way to pick all of these berries off of the stem is to not really pick them at all. Stick them in the freezer. You can give that freezer bag a shake once everything has frozen up, and all the berries just fall right off, and you can process them that way. I had taken a video pretty recently about harvesting the elderberries where I mentioned that I was only going to collect what I collected for us, and then I was just going to leave the rest for the birds. And I had a couple questions, and I wanted to address it here because I think it's really important to talk about feeling like you absolutely have to process and preserve everything on your homestead for human use. There's this responsibility that we feel to preserve and not waste a bit. Waste, I want to tell you, it's relative. To me, feeding the wildlife isn't a waste. A lot of these berries will fall and they'll compost down. They'll feed the microbial life and the worms in the soil. But there's a burden, especially this time of year when there's so much to be taken care of on the farm. When you try to think about these little things, you can really get burnt out worrying about stuff like this. So people had suggested, oh, you could pick them all, freeze dry them, and then sell them in like a roadside stand. I could. That sentence is easy to say. All of that physical work that it would take is not worth it to me. Where we live, it's incredibly rural, and the people that pass our house, they pass it every day. They all have their own farms. You can find elderberry and elderflower wild around here. It wouldn't be worth all of the effort putting into it. So that really has to be considered. And even if it was worth the effort, if you don't have the mental capacity to deal with the elderberries, it's completely fine not to deal with the elderberries. So I wanted to end this video giving you guys a little bit of encouragement to give yourself some grace. It's fine if you leave some things to the bugs and the birds. It's kind of part of this whole life. This life, homesteading, there's a bunch of abundance all the time. You can see all of the volunteer tomatoes that we have. There is no way in heck that I'm going to be able to harvest all of those cherry tomatoes and put them up and save them for human use. It's one of the reasons why they come back all the time, because I physically cannot get to all of those tomatoes. There's so much abundance, and it's a great thing, and you can live among that abundance and enjoy it without having to worry about dealing with it all the time. It can just be, and it's a good thing. Things like those cherry tomatoes, they'll be back next year. Things like this elderberry, it'll be back next year, and if I've got the capacity then, I can deal with it then. If not, I won't, and it's still going to be there, and it's still going to benefit our farm just by being. I actually took a video earlier this year discussing this topic a little bit more in detail, and if you're interested in seeing that, I'll leave it up here. This green stalk, a lot like the raised beds. Hold on, that wasn't the right way to do that.